1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View Purple Air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary. Episode 57 DHD, April 1st, 2025. Trump science policies pose long-term risk. In episode 57 DHD 1, United States Trump administration has begun a war on science. Researchers say nearly 2,000 scientists urged that Congress restore funding to federal agencies decimated by recent cuts to United States. The Trump science policies pose long-term risk. Economists warn since World War II U.S. research funding has led to discoveries that fueled economic gains. Now cutbacks are seen as putting that legacy in jeopardy. 3. United States Nonfiction. This is Your Brain on Politics, a new book by a neuroscientist explores the connections between brain biology and political beliefs. 4. United States crucial week for Trump. New tariffs and elections will test his momentum. Down ballot races in Florida and Wisconsin are seen as a referendum on the White House, while the Trump to be announced reciprocal tariff plan is increasingly worrying investors and consumers. 5. United States no toilet paper and no privacy. Returning to the office, federal workers walk into chaos. President Trump has described his new in-office requirement as a way to ensure workers are doing their jobs. He sees potentially leading more employees to quit as an added benefit. 6. United States, is it time to trade my Rolex for a smartwatch? When it comes to watches, they can tell you more than just the time. Our critic says find out what yours is saying, whether it is smart or analog. 7. United States drug reduces mysterious particle involved in heart attack risk. 8. United States, what I learned about the Trump second term by reading his first 100 executive orders. 9. United States Trump administration moves to shutter library agency. 10. United States, why the right still embraces ivermectin 5 years after the pandemic began. Interest in the anti-parasitic drug is rising again as right-wing influencers promote it and spread misinformation about it. Ivermectin, a drug proven to treat certain parasitic diseases, exploded in popularity during the pandemic amid false claims that it could treat or prevent COVID-19. RAWSEP View Ivermectin use against COVID-19 has risks and no medical benefits. 11. California and Southern California, a sea mammal crisis washes ashore in recent weeks. Hundreds of sea lions, dolphins, and other animals have turned up in the sand dead or seriously ill, alarming rescuers and beachgoers alike. RAWSEP View. The cause is domoic acid. 12. New Jersey Cory Booker slams the Trump policies in Marathon Senate floor speech. The New Jersey senator criticized the Trump plans for Social Security, education, and healthcare, saying the nation is in crisis. He was still speaking in the predawn hours. RAWSEP View. RAWSEP appreciates Senator Booker defending Social Security. 13. New York, New Columbia. President attacked by Stefanik Over. 2023 Text Message Elise Stefanik, a prominent Republican, questioned the Claire Shipman commitment to protecting Jewish students. 14. Texas Johnson loses in court again in bid to settle Talc Cases A. Judge dismissed an attempt to use a bankruptcy court to resolve tens of thousands of claims that the company Talcum Power Products caused cancer. 15. Texas Houston astronauts emphasize gratitude as NASA contends with uncertainty. 16. Texas Midland and measles guest essay. I vaccinated my children, but here is why my neighbors do not. RAWSEP View. A person who did not go into lockdown at the beginning, did not wear a mask in public, and did not take a vaccine when that medical miracle was offered to you are more than stupid. You deliberately, and in the minds of many people maliciously, put the public, which are real individual people, at risk of death. 17. Wisconsin today. Big elections in Wisconsin and Florida, voters in a crucial court race. And 2. How special elections will provide hints of how the country views Trump and Musk months after they took power. 18. United Kingdom. Suffolk. The UK government would not ban phones in schools. These parents stepped up in Britain amid growing evidence of harm to young people from extreme content online. A smartphone-free childhood campaign is going viral. 19. Headlines. The New York Times, April 1st, 2025. Main content. One United States Trump administration has begun a war on science. Researchers say nearly 2,000 scientists urge that Congress restore funding to federal agencies decimated by recent cuts. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, March 31st, 2025. Some 1,900 leading researchers accused the Trump administration in an open letter on Monday of conducting a wholesale assault on U.S. science that could set back research by decades and that threatens the health and safety of Americans. The signatories, all of them elected members of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, warned of the damage being done by layoffs at health and science agencies and cuts and delays to funding that has historically supported research inside the government and across American universities for over 80 years. Wise investments by the U.S. government have built up the research enterprise, making it the envy of the world, the letter said. Astoundingly, Trump is destabilizing this enterprise by gutting funding for research, firing thousands of scientists, removing public access to scientific data, and pressuring researchers to alter or abandon their work on ideological grounds. Thumbnail of page 1. Read the letter. Researchers at academic institutions nationwide say that U.S. science is being dismantled. The letter said that many universities and research institutions had so far kept silent to avoid antagonizing the administration and jeopardizing their funding, but it said the United States scientific enterprise is being decimated. The signatories called on Americans to appeal to Congress to protect scientific funding, with Musk efforts to cut spending and the Trump crackdown on institutions he sees as ideological enemies. The administration has sought to dismantle parts of the federal scientific funding apparatus. Funding from the National Institutes of Health, which supports work by more than 300,000 scientists across the country, has fallen billions of dollars short of typical levels during the early months of Trump. The White House has also moved to cancel research in specific areas like transgender health and climate science. Trump announced last week that it was laying off 10,000 employees at the Health and Human Services Department as part of a broad reorganization that reflected the priorities of the Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. The department has hired a discredited vaccine skeptic to research a link long debunked by scientists between vaccines and autism. On Friday, the United States top vaccine regulator resigned, citing misinformation and lies of Kennedy. In recent weeks, members of the National Academy of Medicine, a nonprofit organization that provides independent health policy advice, began discussing their concerns with members of the National Academies of Sciences and Engineering. Those conversations gave rise to the open letter, said a male medical doctor who is an organizer of the letter who studies health policy at Virginia Commonwealth University. The letter was drafted by a group of 13 scientists representing fields like medicine, climate science, sociology, and economics. I know what this is going to do to life expectancy in the United States, to mortality rates, to the mental health crisis we are having. He said these changes in the research enterprise are going to translate into harms to everyday Americans. He cited, for example, the planned restructuring of the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, a small agency charged with protecting patient safety and guaranteeing Americans access to free preventive services like mammograms. The agency responsible for protecting the quality of healthcare in the United States just got demolished. He said the letter outlines the consequences of funding cuts, including pauses on research studies, faculty layoffs, and reduced graduate student enrollments. It also accuses the administration of engaging in censorship by, among other things, blocking research on topics it finds objectionable, such as climate change, or that yields results it does not like, on topics ranging from vaccine safety to economic trends. To United States, the Trump science policies pose long-term risk. Economists warn since World War II U.S. research funding has led to discoveries that fueled economic gains. Now cutbacks are seen as putting that legacy in jeopardy. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, March 31st, 2025. Ask economists which of the Trump policies they are most concerned about, and many point to cuts to federal support for scientific research. Trump in recent weeks has canceled or frozen billions of dollars in federal grants made to researchers through the National Institutes of Health and has moved to sharply curtail funding for academic medical centers and other institutions. It has also, through the initiative called the Department of Government Efficiency, tried to fire hundreds of workers at the National Science Foundation, an independent federal agency. France and other countries have begun recruiting American scientists, promising a more welcoming environment. Economists across a broad ideological spectrum argue that investments in scientific research, especially the kind of fundamental early-stage research that is too risky to attract private investors, are among the most efficient uses of taxpayer dollars. Research has found that every dollar invested in research and development returns about $5 in economic gains, a figure that likely understates the true return, because it does not account for benefits that are not captured in measures of gross domestic product like longer lives and increased leisure time. It is like a machine. You put $1 in the machine and you get $5 back, said an economist at Northwestern University. From a societal point of view, it is an incredibly high return activity that we already do too little of. 3. United States Nonfiction. This is Your Brain on Politics, a new book by a neuroscientist, explores the connections between brain biology and political beliefs. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, March 31st, 2025. The Ideological Brain, the Radical Science of Flexible Thinking. The author has studied the connections between the brain biology and political ideology. She began her experiments in the months between the Brexit referendum in Britain and the 2016 presidential election in the United States, using a method called the Wisconsin card sorting test. She tracked how her subjects responded to a sudden and arbitrary change in the rules. She also surveyed research on the amygdala, the almond-shaped structure in each hemisphere of the brain that processes emotions, especially negative ones like fear and disgust. Conservatives, she says, often have larger amygdalae, yet figuring out which comes first, whether people with bigger amygdalae are drawn to conservative ideologies or conservative ideologies make human amygdalae bigger, is an ongoing endeavor. The science, in other words, is not settled. Indeed, the ideological brain turns out to have surprisingly little that is definitive to say about the ideological brain. The writer is an able guide through the thicket of scientific research, but her book necessarily includes a few, to be sure, paragraphs Conceding that some of the most tantalizing findings have not been replicated. All of this sounds really nice. I can see how we would be better off if every person on the planet was committed to intellectual humility and humanist sympathy, but I am not sure that I needed a neuroscientist to tell me that. For United States crucial week for Trump, new tariffs and elections will test his momentum. Down ballot races in Florida and Wisconsin are seen as a referendum on the White House, while the Trump to be announced reciprocal tariff plan is increasingly worrying investors and consumers. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3. Nonprofit organization, The New York Times, March 31st, 2025. President, the Trump political momentum will face a major test this week as Democrats try to turn various down ballot races into a referendum on the White House, and Trump long promised tariffs risk rattling allies and consumers alike. A state Supreme Court election in Wisconsin on Tuesday is seen as an indicator of support for Trump, particularly after Elon Musk and groups he funds spent more than $20 million to bolster the Trump preferred candidate. White House officials have also been increasingly concerned with the unusually competitive race on Tuesday for a deep red House seat in Florida left vacant after Representative Michael Waltz stepped down to serve as the Trump national security advisor. The White House is hoping victories in those races will tighten the Trump grip on the Republican Party as his team seeks to overcome the backlash from its inadvertent sharing of military plans on a commercial app with a journalist. The Florida election is critical for Republicans who hold a narrow majority in the House as they try to pass the Trump agenda. The outcome of the Wisconsin race, in a battleground state that Trump narrowly won last year, could be a reflection of the views of voters on the Trump gutting of the federal workforce. 5 United States, no toilet paper and no privacy returning to the office. Federal workers walk into chaos. Trump has described his new in-office requirement as a way to ensure workers are doing their jobs. He sees potentially leading more employees to quit as an added benefit. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3. Nonprofit organization, The New York Times, March 31st, 2025. Federal workers returning to offices have described logistical challenges, cramped conditions, and shortages of basic supplies for some federal employees. Returning to the office has meant an expansion of their duties to include cleaning toilets and taking out the trash. For others, it has been commuting to a federal building only to continue doing their work through video conferencing. Some showed up at the office just to be sent home. Others showed up early and had nowhere to sit. Some employees with the Federal Aviation Administration returned to an office where lead had been detected in the water, and spending freezes have meant a shortage of toilet paper in some buildings. Federal workers have been returning to offices in stages since Trump issued an order to do so right after being sworn in. He has described the requirement as a way to ensure that workers are actually doing their jobs while believing that it could have the added benefit of leading more government employees to quit. Hay are also aware that they could be among the next group of laid-off federal employees at the Department of Energy. For some divisions, agency leadership said employees must return to offices in the Washington area by May 5th, even though some work thousands of miles away from there, but near other departmental facilities. For some, that means making a decision to pick up and move without even knowing whether they will be part of the next round of layoffs. 6 United States, is it time to trade my Rolex for a smartwatch? When it comes to watches, they can tell you more than just the time. Our critic says find out what yours is saying, whether it is smart or analog. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3. Nonprofit organization, The New York Times, March 31st, 2025. Asterisk, all of my friends use smartwatches. ICA not believe that a centuries-old tradition is being replaced by something that looks more like a computer. In 2015, I was an early on adopter of the Apple Watch. I tried it, and I did not like it. Now most of my friends like yours wear a fitness band or a smartwatch or an Oura ring, and there is a lot of discussion of not just steps, but also sleep patterns, heart rates, and blood oxygen levels. The important thing is that the time of day is the least of the matter. 7 United States drug reduces mysterious particle involved in heart attack risk. The Eli Lilly drug caused a major drop in the blood levels of LPA, but further research is needed to show that it will prevent heart attacks and strokes. A 71-year-old man had a heart attack despite low risk on most measures. Doctors discovered he had a very high level of a tiny particle in his blood called LPA. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3. Nonprofit organization, The New York Times, March 30th, 2025. As many as 1 in 5 people, an estimated 64 million in the United States, have elevated levels of a tiny particle in their blood. It can greatly increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes, but few know about it, and almost no doctors test for it because there was not much to be done. Diet does not help, neither does exercise. There have been no drugs, but in the near future that may change. On Sunday, cardiologists announced that an experimental drug made by Eli Lilly, lepidosiran, could lower levels of the particle LPA by 94% with a single injection. The effects lasted for 6 months, and there were no significant side effects, but it is not yet confirmed that reducing LPA levels also reduces the risk of heart attacks and strokes that awaits large clinical trials that are now underway. 8 United States, what I learned about the Trump second term by reading his first 100 executive orders. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3. Nonprofit organization, The New York Times, April 1st, 2025. As a breakdown of the Trump fixations, the orders are not a bad proxy. The verbs in the Trump executive orders are telling. Unleashing gives way to restoring, whether of prosperity, common sense, or freedom of speech. The death penalty, a Trump preoccupation for decades, also requires restoring, as do names like Mount McKinley that honor American greatness. Finally, there is much protecting and defending in the Trump orders: protecting citizens against immigrant invaders, defending women against gender ideology, protecting the priceless and profound gift of U.S. citizenship from the children of illegal immigrants, and defending religious liberty through a new White House faith office. These verbs tell us how Trump sees the country. Only an inhibited America would need unleashing. Only a neglected America would need restoring. Only a vulnerable America would need protecting. No wonder that Trump has immediately declared several simultaneous national emergencies involving energy, supplies, the border, criminal cartels, and even the international International Criminal Court and the man Trump blames for this deteriorated state of our union is Biden, who in recent years subbed in for Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama as the Trump nemesis of choice. Throughout his executive orders, Trump trashes his immediate predecessor in the White House for pushing radical climate policies, trampling free speech, embedding DEI throughout the federal government, limiting energy production, encouraging an immigrant invasion, commuting the sentences of death row inmates, and above all deploying federal power against political enemies. That last point is the subject of the Trump first executive order EO-14147, and it carries on where his campaign left off. The American people have witnessed the previous administration engage in a systematic campaign against its perceived political opponents, weaponizing the legal force of numerous federal law enforcement agencies and the intelligence community. Such actions, his order asserts, were not about the legitimate pursuit of justice, but about inflicting political pain. The irony of this order, titled Ending the Weaponization of the Federal Government, is that in several subsequent orders Trump commands his own administration to engage in such weaponization. Trump repeatedly attacks major law firms that have worked with Democratic clients or that have ties to prior investigations against Trump, suspending their security clearances and terminating any government contracts. He also calls on the Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence to review or investigate various actions by the Biden administration, which he accuses of behavior that is not just short-sighted but also illegal and immoral. The offense of the former president, as expressed in the orders, is not just that he weaponized government against Trump, it is that the failures of Biden undercut American greatness. In many orders, Trump first extols our United States virtues and riches, and then chastises the Biden administration for diminishing and misusing them. Servants should interpret the laws they have sworn to uphold. For those opposing the orders, the short answer: do not bother. The slightly longer answer: the President and the Attorney General, subject to the supervision of the President and control, shall provide authoritative interpretations of law for the executive branch, and those interpretations are controlling on all federal workers. The order states, consider the logic, because the Constitution empowers the President, and the President faithfully executes the law. The actions as chief executive of the President are necessarily lawful, and his interpretations of the law, say when he talks about running for a third term or when he attempts to unmake the 14th Amendment, are necessarily correct. And so a document that is held up as the greatest force for good the world has ever known is deployed to justify the personal preferences of one man, and that is an order. 9. United States Trump administration moves to shutter library agency. The staff of the Independent Institute of Museum and Library Services, the largest source of federal funding for museums and libraries, were put on leave. The move came 2 weeks after President Trump issued an executive order naming the Institute of Museum and Library Services as one of 7 that should be eliminated to the maximum extent consistent with applicable law. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. And relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, March 31, 2025. On March 20th, Keith E. Sonderling, the Deputy Secretary of Labor, was sworn in as acting director, replacing Cindy Landrum, a career library professional. Shortly after being appointed, Sonderling visited the agency with a team that included at least one staff member of the Department of Government Efficiency, who set up offices and obtained access to agency computer systems on Monday afternoon. After the team made several additional visits, the 70 employees of the agency were informed by supervisors that they were being put on administrative leave for 90 days and were not permitted to access agency premises or systems. 10. United States: why the right still embraces ivermectin. 5 years after the pandemic began, interest in the anti-parasitic drug is rising again as right-wing influencers promote it and spread misinformation about it. Ivermectin, a drug proven to treat certain parasitic diseases, exploded in popularity during the pandemic amid false claims that it could treat or prevent COVID-19. RAWSEP View Ivermectin. Use against COVID-19 has risks and no medical benefits. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, March 31, 2025. Joe Grinsteiner is a gregarious online personality who touts the anti-parasitic drug ivermectin. In a recent Facebook video, he produced a tube of veterinary-grade ivermectin paste, the kind made for deworming horses. He gave the tube a squeeze, then he licked a slug of the stuff and gulped. Grinsteiner said in the February 25th video, one of a number of ivermectin-related posts he has made that have drawn millions of views on Facebook this year. Actually, that tastes like dead cancer. Ivermectin, a drug proven to treat certain parasitic diseases, exploded in popularity during the pandemic amid false claims that it could treat *** or prevent COVID-19. Now, despite a persistent message from federal health officials that its medical benefits are limited, interest in ivermectin is rising again, particularly among American conservatives who are seeing it promoted by right-wing influencers. The facts about ivermectin: recent claims promoting the drug are alarming. Doctors Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has in the past embraced the idea that ivermectin can treat COVID, but whether he might seek to integrate the drug into his Make America Healthy Again agenda remains unclear. Dr. Califf, the former FDA commissioner, sees it differently. All interventions have risks, he said, and if you have no benefit and you have some risk, then why on earth there is no rational reason why someone should take the intervention. 11. California and Southern California: a sea mammal crisis washes ashore. In recent weeks, hundreds of sea lions, dolphins, and other animals have turned up in the sand, dead or seriously ill, alarming rescuers and beachgoers alike. RAWSEP View: the cause is domoic acid. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, March 31, 2025. A man who works for a sea mammal rescue group rushed to help save the animals and transport them to get treated. Both sea lions were given ID numbers, which told a story. They were tagged as 25, 193, and 25, 195, the 193rd and 195th patients of the group for the year, all along the Southern California coastline from San Diego to Santa Barbara. Hundreds of animals, sea lions, dolphins, seabirds are washing up on the sand, either dead or seriously ill. The cause is a neurotoxin produced by an algae bloom. The toxin, known as domoic acid, is harmless to fish but can be deadly to sea mammals. Fish carry the toxin, but if mammals and birds eat the fish, the toxin can poison them, causing seizures, making them behave erratically, or putting them in a coma. The only treatment is to flush out the toxin and medicate the symptoms. Coastal researchers and officials say it has become a marine life crisis that has overwhelmed rescue organizations, distressed beachgoers, and hurt the ocean habitat of California. Algal blooms are not rare in California, but the amount of toxic acid the blooms have been releasing and the scale of harm they have been causing to sea life have puzzled scientists. Some say it has to do with climate change and warming sea temperatures. Others say the nutrients in the runoff from land can stimulate algae bloom. Scientists with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are studying whether the washed out ash and debris from the Los Angeles wildfires in January may have influenced the current bloom. More research is needed to understand the changing blooms is largely funded by NOAA and has come under threat. The sea lions have a 60% chance of survival from the toxin at the rescue center. Veterinarians examined both animals. Both sea lions have a good chance of surviving. Throughout the weekend, they were stable and resting. Eventually, they gained some identity too. They were 25, 193, and 25, 195. No more now. They are Carlin and Kelly. 12. New Jersey Cory Booker slams the Trump policies in marathon Senate floor speech. The New Jersey senator criticized the Trump plans for Social Security, education, and healthcare, saying the nation is in crisis. He was still speaking in the pre-dawn hours. RAWSEP View RAWSEP appreciates Senator Booker defending Social Security. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 1st, 2025. Senator Cory Booker spoke in an all-night session on the Senate floor early Tuesday in an effort to seize the national spotlight and criticize the Trump policies on healthcare, Social Security, education, and much else. Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, began speaking on Monday evening and said he planned to continue for as long as he was physically able. He was still going as of 5 a.m. Eastern Time. The speech focused in part on what Senator Booker said were Trump plans to cut funding for Medicaid, among other programs. The White House has denied that it plans to cut Medicaid benefits, but the president and his allies have attacked Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security over what they claim is waste, fraud, and abuse. I rise with the intention of disrupting the normal business of the United States Senate for as long as I am physically able, Senator Booker said near the start of his speech. I rise tonight because I believe sincerely that our nation is in crisis. Stop speaking to allow questions from fellow Democrats, including Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, without formally relinquishing the floor. His speech was not a filibuster because it did not come during a debate over a specific bill or nominee, but it could still disrupt official business if it continues past noon, when the Senate is scheduled to convene. Before his speech, Senator Booker said on social media that he was heading to the Senate floor because Trump and Musk had shown what he called a complete disregard for the rule of law. These are not normal times in America, Senator Booker said. The Musk feed on X, his social media platform, was active late into the night, but it made no mention of Senator Booker or his all-night speech. Neither did the Trump Truth social feed. Viewers followed along on the official YouTube channel of Senator Booker with Dawn. About an hour away, Senator Booker, a one-time presidential candidate, looked full of energy as he read from papers on his lectern in a booming voice, but the length of his session at 10 hours and counting was not close to making Senate history. 13. New York, New Columbia president attacked by Stefanik Over 2023. Text message Elise Stefanik, a prominent Republican, questioned the Claire Shipman commitment to protecting Jewish students. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, March 31st, 2025. Claire Shipman is only days into her job as acting president of Columbia University, but is already being targeted by a prominent House Republican who questions her commitment to fighting anti-Semitism on campus. Ms. Shipman, in a private text message in December 2023 to Nemat Shafik, who was then president of Columbia, referred to congressional hearings into campus anti-Semitism as Capitol Hill nonsense, according to a transcript of the exchange released by the House Committee on Education and the Workforce as part of an investigative report last year. The comment is coming back to haunt Ms. Shipman. Representative Elise Stefanik, who is remaining in the House after Trump withdrew her nomination to be U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, seized on the remark during a television interview Sunday, predicting that Ms. Shipman will not last long in her new position. Move our community forward. She wrote, "My request right now is that we all, students, faculty, staff, and everyone in this remarkable place, come together and work to protect and support this invaluable repository of knowledge, this home to the next generation of intellectual explorers, and this place of great and continuing promise," Ms. Shipman wrote. 14. Texas, Johnson & Johnson loses in court again in bid to settle talc cases. A judge dismissed an attempt to use a bankruptcy court to resolve tens of thousands of claims that the company talcum power products caused cancer. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, March 31st, 2025. A federal bankruptcy judge in Houston on Monday rejected the Johnson & Johnson request to approve a $9 billion settlement with tens of thousands of people who are suing the company over claims that its talcum powder products caused cancer. The proposal would have resolved nearly all current and future claims that the company talc products contained asbestos and caused cancer. 15. Texas, Houston astronauts emphasize gratitude as NASA contends with uncertainty. Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore spoke in their first news conference since returning to Earth 2 weeks ago from an unexpectedly long ISS stay that lasted more than 9 months. NASA astronauts say they would fly on the Boeing Starliner again. Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams were brought back to Earth in a SpaceX capsule after problems with the Boeing Starliner delayed their return by about 9 months. "We are going to rectify all issues that we encountered. We are going to fix them. We are going to make it work. Boeing is completely committed. NASA is completely committed." And with that, I would get on in a heartbeat. Yeah, I would agree the spacecraft is really capable. There were a couple of things that need to be fixed, like Butch mentioned, and folks are actively working on that. But it is a great spacecraft, and it has a lot of capability that other spacecraft do not have, and to see that thing successful And to be part of that program is an honor excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times, March 31st, 2025. After a stay aboard the International Space Station that unexpectedly stretched to 9.5 months, the NASA astronaut Suni Williams is back to doing something she enjoys on Earth. "I actually went out and ran 3 miles yesterday," Ms. Williams, who returned to Earth 2 weeks ago, said on Monday during a news conference at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston. "So I will give myself a little pat on the back." Ms. Williams and her fellow astronaut Butch Wilmore repeatedly expressed gratitude. Suni Williams thanked the 2 astronauts who had shared the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule that gave them a ride back to Earth. She thanked NASA, she thanked SpaceX, she thanked Boeing, she thanked the medical team that helped them get accustomed to gravity. Again, those words of gratitude may have been appreciated by people at the space agency, who, like many federal workers, are uncertain about their mission, their direction, or even their continued employment since the Trump inauguration. 16 Texas Midland and measles guest essay. "I vaccinated my children, but here is why my neighbors do not." RAWSEP View: a person who did not go into lockdown at the beginning, did not wear a mask in public, and did not take a vaccine when that medical miracle was offered to you are more than stupid. You deliberately, and in the minds of many people maliciously, put the public, which are real individual people, at risk of death. It is a luxury usually afforded to the rich living in a bubble to ask those affected by stupid actions caused by stupid views to refrain from pointing out that the unscientific views of those taking stupid actions are also stupid and unscientific and inhumane views. Whether they live in Midland, Texas or Washington, D.C., survivors of the COVID pandemic should examine their own actions during the pandemic so that they will not take those stupid actions again and will not again threaten the lives or end the lives of those around them simply because they have silenced those around them from pointing out that their actions are stupid, because being called stupid hurts their feelings, the feelings of people who did not obey lockdowns, did not wear masks in public, and did not take miraculous vaccines that were offered to them. Elon Musk recently showed during a televised interview that it hurt his feelings when called unfeeling or even stupid when he fired thousands of federal workers unnecessarily and to the detriment of many government functions, including scientific and medical research, leading to future vaccines that will without a doubt save lives if those vaccines are taken and if masks are worn in the presence of airborne diseases. Sparing the feelings of Elon Musk and sparing the feelings of people who do not get vaccinated during a pandemic and those that do not wear masks during a pandemic is counterproductive to saving the lives of other people who are innocent of risking the lives of other innocent people. Guilt is not a fun emotion, but in this case, the Midland, Texas mother or her neighbor who does not take vaccines or wear a mask or even does not obey lockdown instructions during a public health emergency should feel guilt and not feel vindicated, because she has survived when others have died and time has passed since the pandemic, and maybe people have forgotten that she should be feeling some guilt and she should learn from her own mistakes in not following medical instructions. That caused her business to close, although she did get a check from the government along with everyone else from on high from medical authorities who knew imperfectly then and know better now how to protect the public and save lives. The important thing to bring out of the pandemic is that masks were effective and vaccines saved lives. Saving lives through scientific methods is what matters. Hurt feelings about the level of intelligence you exhibited is your personal guilt inconveniently telling you to pay attention to medical authorities next time, not a signal to destroy science because it made you feel dumb. That would be following in lockstep the thinking of Trump a little too closely. Studying the psychology of Trump and the psychology of a Midland, Texas mother will make the Midland, Texas mother feel vindicated and make her forget her guilt in not following public health advice from medical authorities from on high, but now brought low by mass firings. But to onlookers, it just makes her look dumb, and no one wants that. But if the shoe fits where derision did not kill you, and if seniors in nursing homes survive, they reap the benefits of lockdowns, even if they had to talk on telephones and use Zoom to communicate with relatives. If your children could not learn using the latest technology, perhaps they were not brought up right. And if they were lonely at home, perhaps your motherly skills at home schooling revealed that you yourself were not well educated even when attending school in person in your youth. Public school should not be babysitting for parents who are not there for their children. If you are in lockdown together, you the parent are largely responsible for the mental health of the children you shared a home with during the pandemic. Live and learn for the people who were harmed from your not going into lockdown, not wearing a mask, and not taking a vaccine. Many of them are voiceless now because they are dead from COVID-19 from your contribution to spreading the disease when it could have been contained by your following medical advice from on high, as you call it. If you study biology, biochemistry, or even study medicine, you would not have needed to be advised. You would know the reasons for this medical advice. If your child studied scientific and medical subjects while on lockdown, or even if the senior citizens you know studied scientific and medical subjects while on lockdown in a nursing home, those people would emerge from lockdown knowing that if they took these steps, they would be protecting themselves and others, and they would realize that in a public health emergency we are all in this together, and we should humanely protect our fellow men. Politicization on the right, not derision from left, is the reason that more people died from COVID-19 than necessary. Choosing not to follow medical advice because of embarrassment when your wrongdoing became evident and doubling down on what you were doing wrong is not the sign of mature judgment that a mother of children should exhibit. Derision from your own children probably also followed and has dogged you for years. How embarrassing to be a stupid parent and to endanger your children and have them know it. How rewarding to your inflated self-image to bring down medicine and science with government defunding. How delusional to feel sad about your mistakes being pointed out rather than facing reality and resolving never to make those same mistakes again. What you label as derision from the left was probably black humor in the face of death. Some attentions to your action by the left must have started with, why would someone not take steps to save their own lives and the lives of others? What economic reason for keeping a business open instead of going into lockdown during a pandemic with no vaccine is greater than the need to save your life and the Lives of those around you? What reason is behind visiting people in nursing homes during a pandemic when there is no vaccine, when the risks of those people in nursing homes dying is therefore high? Do parents not know that sending their children to school during a pandemic when there is no vaccine risks the children bringing COVID-19 home? At some point, the people who are not going into lockdown at the beginning are not wearing masks in public and are not taking the miraculous vaccine. When it become available, become black humor laughingstocks, or if the bystanders laughing are facing sober reality, become monstrous, selfish, short-sighted, and all those other words that bring embarrassment to a mother from Midland, Texas, unfortunately, but perhaps fortunately if that. Recognition of wrongdoing overwhelms the political pressure to do the wrong thing in Midland, Texas for political expedience that harms herself and her children and her elderly relatives. First, it is mean to deliberately take actions that lead to other people dying when you know better or are helpfully told better by medical authorities. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, March 31st, 2025. This spring in West Texas, it is as if the seasonal winds blew us back in time. We are catching national attention for calamities that seem straight out of the 1930s: grim dust storms and a measles outbreak, which started about 65 miles from my home in Midland. Sometimes on social media, local moms share dark jokes. Was not expecting to be living like a Depression-era American Girl doll in 2025 like those moms. I have been caught off guard by much that has unfolded over the past decade. If you had told me in 2011, when my oldest daughter was born, that driving a Tesla and being a crunchy granola mom would become right-coded by her 14th birthday, I would have laughed. And if you had told me, the mom who always listened to her pediatrician, that I would grow more skeptical of the advice offered by public health authorities over the next decade, I would have thought you had the wrong person. But a lot has changed. Many Americans have lost trust in public health agencies and the advice they offer, especially in more conservative parts of the country, like mine. That declining trust is showing up in personal choices. In 2018, some 46,000 Texans requested vaccine exemption forms from the Texas Department of State Health Services. In 2024, more than 93,000 did. If I had to do it all over again, I would still follow the advice of my pediatrician and vaccinate my children. But in the years since COVID, I increasingly understand the thought process of my neighbors who do not. There is a tendency to assume the worst about people who do not trust the advice of the public health authorities about vaccines. At best, they are dismissed as backward and stupid, at worst selfish and unempathetic. I feel the pull to dismiss some people as all those things, such as the pastor in Fort Worth who bragged that the school at his church had the lowest measles vaccination rate in Texas. The herd is getting smaller. Cases of measles across the United States suggest the herd is breaking down. There are many sensible, not science-denying, moderate or slightly right-of-center American parents like me who see immense value in having a national public health authority and yet no longer trust it. We question whether health agencies are nonpartisan, value-neutral, science-driven, and financially independent of big pharma. While the spark of this distrust was glowing before 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic threw gasoline on the fire. In March 2020, I went into lockdown. Within a few months, we were attending in-person birthday parties again and resumed worship at our churches, much to the derision of huge swaths of our country. Our small businesses were crushed. Older people experienced inhumane social isolation and died alone in nursing homes, and children struggled through online school. By late spring 2020, we had discovered one of the few mercies of COVID. Children were not commonly succumbing to the disease. I started publicly calling for them to return to school in person that summer outside of my local community, where most people seemed to agree with me. The backlash was swift and cruel. Like many other dissenters, I was accused of denying science and lacking concern for humanity. Authorities I would trusted to tell me when to vaccinate my children for measles and polio also said a cheap cloth mask from Old Navy could help protect them from microscopic pathogens. It made no sense, yet expressing doubts about following the science was treated as sacrilegious. RAWSEP View. The mistake this writer from Midland, Texas, makes is equating religious edicts with science-based advice. The medical authorities, who are authorities because they have studied science and medicine, advised lockdowns, masks, and vaccines because through research it was found that these methods of COVID-19 control save lives, and these medical authorities are not giving this advice because they were following in lockstep with religious ideas that had no application to real life on earth. We can all agree that religious ideas are not based on science, but based on faith, and religious ideas do not come from practical scientific facts. Although hopefully religious ideas such as ideas that promote cleanliness and scientific ideas may coincide occasionally and provide a measure of safety. Inadvertently, it was a pandemic, and information evolved over time. Mistakes were unavoidable. American leaders wanted children to resume their normal lives only if they were vaccinated, but some European countries focused only on vaccinating children in high-risk households or those who had major underlying medical issues, and some countries seemed to take seriously potential risks. This approach took into account the lower likelihood for children for bad outcomes from the virus. Trump has never been a leader to exemplify humility and respect, but he has elevated some experts who could rebuild public trust, given their appeal to many skeptics for their willingness to bear personal consequences to defend the right to dissent, such as the new leader of the National Institutes of Health and the new commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. RAWSEP View. Both these newly appointed leaders at NIH and the FDA are vaccine skeptics themselves and put our country at greater risk from pandemics because of their unfounded and debunked vaccine skepticism. RAWSEP believes the reflective opportunity we have is not to reflect on how to coax or bribe people to take vaccines. RAWSEP believes the reflective opportunity is the opportunity for individuals like this Midland, Texas mother to reflect on their past bad and wrong behavior during COVID-19 pandemic, and upon reflection resolve to do the best and right thing and get a vaccine during this measles epidemic, and even do the right thing and urge others to get the measles vaccine. The writer of this article is no good example by her own description in this article, but since she sees the COVID-19 epidemic as in the past, she absolves herself of all blame for spreading COVID-19, which she surely did by calling for ending lockdowns before the health health authorities did. If there is reflection, it should be for her to change and be a better person now, and not a disease-spreading bully, and in the future change her own actions. From the article, The Measles Outbreak in West Texas is tragic, but it provides the sort of reflective opportunity our country needs, because next time it might not be the measles, a disease that thankfully most Americans are vaccinated against. We might instead face a novel virus with devastating consequences for our children. RAWSEP View, having newly appointed health authorities who are vaccine skeptics, is a step backward toward policies that may please people who refuse measles vaccines in Midland, Texas, but who put public health in peril and lead to many people dying unnecessarily from measles and any other epidemic that may strike the United States in the future. This Trump feel-good policy of employing vaccine skeptics at the highest levels may make people who meet their maker early and happily during a measles of a future COVID-19 pandemic feel good, but the rest of us who would like to live a normal lifespan may be reduced to derision of those very vaccine skeptics who could most accurately be described as disease-spreading bullies, but are described in this article as suffering the most of anyone, as embarrassed victims of left-wing ridicule. The editor of RAWSEP has not poked fun at any people who have died of measles in 2025, I promise you, and actually does not think any people who refuse measles vaccines for themselves or their children in 2025 is a figure of fun, just as people who protest Musk actions in 2025 are not the ones setting Teslas on fire. Our left-wing hands are clean, which cannot be said for right-wing disease-spreading bullies who act so irrationally that they must be explained by money-grubbing like Musk himself. 17 Wisconsin today. Big elections in Wisconsin and Florida. Voters in a crucial court race, and 2 House special elections will provide hints of how the country views Trump and Musk months after they took power. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times, April 1st, 2025. 2 states nearly 1,000 miles apart will on Tuesday provide the best evidence yet of whether Trump and his Republican allies maintain robust support or whether they face a growing backlash led by a re-energized Democratic Party. In Wisconsin, a nearly $100 million race for control of the state Supreme Court has morphed from an important clash over the Wisconsin direction into a referendum on the Musk supersized role in national politics. In Florida, one of 2 special elections for deep red House seats suddenly seems too close for comfort for Republicans. Democrats, while still expecting to lose, are watching the margins closely for signs that their party is ascended. This is all happening while Musk stands to benefit financially from the candidates he has thrown his money and influence behind. Tesla, the electric vehicle company Musk controls, has a case against Wisconsin pending in the Wisconsin courts, and Trump has gone out of his way to promote the products of the billionaire. From the White House, defeat for conservatives, of course, would hardly mean that Musk would stop spending on elections, but it would prove to Democrats that he is beatable with enough money and base energy. Still, while Democrats may see Musk as a figure who fires up their base and supercharges liberal fundraising, that is a lot easier for them to do when Wisconsin is the marquee race in the country and a focus of national attention. If Musk were bankrolling dozens of Trump-allied candidates for governor, Senate, and Congress across the country next year, it could be a far more difficult proposition to match his financial might with the same degree of grassroots enthusiasm when national attention is more diffuse. 18 United Kingdom. Suffolk. The UK government would not ban phones in schools. These parents stepped up in Britain amid growing evidence of harm to young people from extreme content online. A smartphone-free childhood campaign is going viral. RAWSEP View. There are parental controls that can be put on smartphones. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times, April 1st, 2025. The idea of getting her eldest child a smartphone had long felt inevitable, said a Suffolk woman, but by early last year, when her daughter was 8 years old, it filled her with dread. When she talked to other parents, everyone universally said, yes, it is a nightmare, but you have got no choice, recalled the 41-year-old Suffolk woman. She decided to test that a friend had shared her concerns about the addictive qualities of smartphones and the impact of social media on mental health, so they created a WhatsApp group to strategize. Then the woman, who lives in rural Suffolk in the east of England, posted her thoughts on Instagram. What if we could switch the social norm so that in our school, our town, our country, it was an odd choice to make to give your child a smartphone at 11? She wrote, what if we could hold off until they are 14 or 16? Colindale is in the borough of Barnet, which in February announced plans to become the first borough in Britain to ban smartphones in all its public schools. The initiative will affect some 63,000 children. Eton, one of the most elite private schools in Britain, announced last year that new students would be banned from bringing smartphones and would instead be issued with Nokia handsets that can only text and make calls in Suffolk. The founders of the Smartphone Free Childhood Initiative are aware that their success in attracting parents to their cause is partly thanks to social media and messaging apps on which they have spread the word. There are loads of positive things about this technology. A spokesman said, we are not trying to say that technology is bad, just that we need to have a conversation as a society about when it is appropriate for children to have unrestricted access to this stuff. 19 headlines. The New York Times, April 1st, 2025. United States Book Review, The Ideological Brain. The New York Times. United States Book Review, The Power of Parting by Eamon Dolan. The New York Times. United States. Crucial week for Trump. New tariffs in elections will test his momentum. The New York Times. United States. Democrats sue Trump over executive order on elections. The New York Times. United States. Eli Lilly drug reduces mysterious LPA particle involved in heart attack risk. The New York Times. United States. Elon Musk visits CIA to discuss Doge cuts. The New York Times. United States. Federal workers walk into chaos amid return to office. The New York Times. United States. Hegseth mandates uniform fitness standards for combat roles. The New York Times. United States. Is it time to trade my Rolex for a smartwatch? The New York Times. United States. Johnson & Johnson loses in court again in bid to settle talc cases. The New York Times. United States. Lee Zeldin EPA head shuts National Environmental Museum. The New York Times, United States NASA astronauts speak for first time after 9 months stay in space at ISS. The New York Times, United States, OpenAI closes deal that values company at $300 billion. The New York Times, United States, opinion IVF gene selection and embryo screening. Is this the future of making babies? The New York Times, United States, opinion what I learned about the Trump second term by reading his first 100 executive orders. The New York Times, United States, real estate fund exceeds $25 billion for affordable housing. The New York Times, United States, the strategy behind the Trump repeated musings about a third term. The New York Times, United States, Trump administration moves to shutter library agency. The New York Times, United States, Trump administration set to remake the seating chart of reporters. The New York Times, United States, Trump era pivot on seabed mining draws global rebuke. The New York Times, United States, why the right still embraces ivermectin. The New York Times, Alabama say not prosecute those who help with out-of-state abortions. Judge rules. The New York Times, California, why are dolphins and sea lions washing up dead on Southern California beaches. The New York Times, Massachusetts, Trump administration will review billions in funding for Harvard. The New York Times, New Jersey, Cory Booker slams the Trump policies in marathon Senate floor speech. The New York Times, New York, New Columbia president attacked by Stefanik Over 2023 text message. The New York Times, Texas, Abbott delays calling a special House election. Democrats cry foul. Wisconsin today, big elections in Wisconsin and Florida. The New York Times, United Kingdom, the UK government would not ban smartphones in schools. These parents stepped up. The New York Times, China, US sanctions Chinese and Hong Kong officials for pursuing activists abroad. The New York Times, military drills of China around Taiwan are a warning to its president. The New York Times.
One introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue, presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burn tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burn tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burn tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View Purple Air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.